I'm not even sure where to start, but since this is Reddit, I'll try to keep it simple. I came home from work to find a sold sign planted right in the middle of my front lawn. Not for sale, not pending, sold. My name is Ina Watson. I'm 28 years old and I work as a structural engineer. The job pays well, but it drains everything out of you. Long hours, constant travel, deadlines that don't care if you're exhausted or sick. I spend more time on construction sites and in airports than I do anywhere else. The one thing that made all of it feel worth it was my house, my place, my sanctuary. Or at least, that's what I thought. I had just gotten back from a 3-week business trip out of state. I was running on 3 hours of airplane sleep, caffeine, and pure muscle memory. All I wanted was a shower, my couch, and silence. Then I turned onto my street. The bright red and white sign hit me so hard I slammed on the brakes. My tires screeched and my heart dropped straight into my stomach. I just sat there for a second, staring. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I pulled into the driveway, barely parked straight, and jumped out of the car. My work bag was still slung over my shoulder as I practically ran toward the front door. That's when I heard his voice. "Well, look who's back early." Richard, my stepfather. The front door was already open. I stormed inside and froze. Boxes everywhere. My furniture wrapped in plastic. My books stacked in labeled cartons. My life reduced to cardboard and packing tape. Richard stood in the middle of my living room, calmly sealing a box like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Oh, hey, kiddo," he said without looking up. "Long trip?" He always called me kiddo, like I was still a clueless teenager instead of a woman who had paid for everything in that house. I dropped my bag onto the floor. "Why," I said slowly, "is there a sold sign on my lawn?" Richard sighed, long and dramatic, like I was interrupting him. "We sold it." My stomach twisted. "We?" I repeated. I stepped closer. "What do you mean, we?" He finally looked at me, eyebrows raised like I was being deliberately slow. "Your mother and I, obviously. Ina, you don't need a luxury home like this at your age. It's ridiculous." Something hot and sharp crawled up my spine. "This is my house," I said. "I bought it. I pay the mortgage. You had no right." Richard laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not awkward. A full, confident laugh. "Oh, sweetheart," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder like I was a child. "You really think you did all this on your own?" I shrugged his hand off. "It's family money," he continued smoothly. "Shared assets. You don't actually own anything." The words hit me harder than a slap. Family money. Shared assets. "No," I said, "that's not true." He smirked. "Oh, don't look so shocked. You signed the paperwork years ago. You should really read the fine print, kiddo." My hands started shaking. Here's the part that still makes me sick. Yes, I paid for the house. Every payment. Every bill. But when I bought it at 23, the bank required a cosigner. My credit was good, just not good enough. My mom volunteered Richard. "It's just paperwork," she'd said back then, waving away my concerns. "It'll still be your house." So I trusted her. What I didn't know was that while I was working out of state months ago, Richard refinanced the mortgage behind my back. My name was quietly removed from the deed. Legally, the house was his. "Where is Mom?" I asked, my voice tight. Richard shrugged. "Already in Italy. Needed a break." My chest felt hollow. "So you sold my house," I said. "Took the money and left me with nothing." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," he replied, pinching my cheek like I was 5. "You're young. You'll figure it out." I stepped back, disgust crawling through me. Richard zipped up a sleek leather suitcase and checked his watch. "Listen," he said casually, "I'd love to stay and chat, but I've got a flight to catch. First class, private tours, 5-star hotels, the works." I stared at him. He walked past me toward the door. "I'll bring you back a nice souvenir." And then he was gone, just like that. I stood there in the silence, surrounded by empty space where my life used to be. The couch where I collapsed after work, the kitchen where I cooked at midnight, the walls that held every version of me I'd fought to become. Gone. My stepfather was sipping champagne at 30,000 feet, convinced he'd won, and I was standing in the ruins of my own home, trying not to scream. I called my mom. No answer. Again. Straight to voicemail. By the third call, my hands were shaking, not just with anger, but with the realization that she already knew. She had known for weeks, maybe months. I texted her, "Call me, now." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. A message popped up. "Ina, I don't want to do this over the phone. We'll talk when we're back." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. She wanted to wait. After they sold my house. After the money was gone. I let Richard board his flight. I let him toast his victory in Europe. Because what he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that he'd made one mistake. He left just enough behind for me to tear everything apart. And when he came home, he was going to find out what it feels like to lose everything. I wish I could say I screamed, that I threw something, that I collapsed on the floor sobbing, but the truth is worse. I sat there in the empty living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes, and felt something inside me go completely still. After Richard left for the airport, the house didn't feel loud or dramatic. It felt hollow, like it had already accepted that it wasn't mine anymore. I called my mom again, straight to voicemail. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed, then called again, and again. By the 5th attempt, my hand was shaking so badly I had to switch phones. Finally, she picked up. "Ina," she said calmly, too calmly, "I really don't appreciate the tone of your messages." I laughed. It slipped out before I could stop it, sharp and bitter. "You don't appreciate my tone?" I said. "You sold my house." She sighed, the same sigh she used when I was a teenager and disappointed her. "Sweetheart," she said, "Richard and I talked about it. And we really think this is for the best." For the best. For who? I asked quietly. "For you," she replied without hesitation. "A house like that is too much responsibility. It's big, expensive. You're never even there. You're always working." I pressed my fingers into my temple. "I work because I chose that responsibility," I said. "I bought that house." "You're still young," she said gently, like she was explaining something obvious. "You don't need all that space right now." I closed my eyes. "Then why didn't you talk to me?" I asked. "Why didn't you tell me?" There was a pause. "Richard helped you," she finally said. "He took the stress off your shoulders." "Helped me. And don't worry," she added quickly, "we didn't take everything. We found something much more suitable for you." I opened my eyes. "What does that mean?" "A condo," she said brightly. "A modern one in the city, easy to manage, affordable." My stomach dropped. "You stole my home," I said slowly. "And now you're trying to sell me a condo?" She exhaled like I was being unreasonable. "Ina, look at the bigger picture. Richard will handle the details when we're back. A portion of the sale money will go toward it." "A portion," I repeated. Another pause. "Well, some of it went toward our trip," she admitted. "But it's family money. We all deserve some happiness." Family money. The phrase made me feel sick. I ended the call without saying goodbye. That was when my boyfriend Mark showed up. He took one look at my face and didn't ask questions, just set his keys down and wrapped his arms around me while I stood there, stiff and silent. "They sold it," I said into his chest. "They sold my house." Mark didn't interrupt. He just listened as I told him everything. Richard's smirk, the paperwork, my mom's excuses. When I finally stopped talking, he said quietly, "Okay, then we don't panic." I pulled back and stared at him. "What?" "We don't panic," he repeated. "We document, we breathe, and we figure out what they did wrong." "What if they didn't?" I asked. "What if they got away with it?" Mark held my gaze. "Then we make sure they don't do it again." That night, while he ordered takeout I barely touched, I went through every document I had ever signed. Mortgage papers, bank statements, emails. That's when I found it. The refinancing documents. My name wasn't there. Not crossed out. Not misspelled. Gone. Months ago, while I was working out of state, Richard had refinanced the mortgage under his name only. Strategically. Quietly. Legally, it gave him the right to sell. I checked my bank account next. $490,000 from the sale. then a flood of withdrawals. Luxury hotels, designer stores, a wire transfer overseas. He'd burned through everything. I sat on the floor, staring at the screen until the numbers blurred. Mark knelt beside me. Then they made mistakes. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer. The second was to my uncle, my mom's older brother, and Richard's longtime accountant. Both conversations ended the same way. Silence. Then anger. Ina, my lawyer said slowly, if he refinanced without your consent, if there's forgery involved, that's fraud. My uncle was even more blunt. He's been hiding income for years, he said. If he's sloppy enough to do this, he's sloppy enough to leave a trail. I didn't tell my mom anything. I didn't mourn Richard. I let them enjoy Europe. While they were sipping wine in Paris, I was preparing something else. Something quieter. Something permanent. 3 days before Richard's return, my phone rang. We found it, my lawyer said. Forged signatures. Mortgage fraud. The sale was illegal. Then my uncle called, laughing. IRS is going to love this, he said. Hidden accounts, unreported income. I stood in the empty living room and smiled for the first time since this started. When Richard landed back home, he walked straight into the collapse of everything he'd built. Accounts frozen. Cards declined. The house he sold, no longer his. I watched from across the street as the keypad failed and my mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, panicking. His phone rang. The IRS notice had arrived. I drove away without a word. That night, my mom called me, her voice shaking. Ina, do you know what's happening? I took a slow breath. You stole my house, I said. This is the bigger picture. She tried to justify it. Again, I laughed and hung up. I didn't go back to the house after that. There was no point. It wasn't mine anymore, not emotionally at least. The place had become a shell, a stage where Richard had rehearsed his little performance for months while smiling to my face. Instead, I stayed with Mark. Every morning I woke up expecting the anger to hit me all over again. And it did, but it was different now. Sharper, cleaner, focused. While Richard was still posting photos from Europe, wine glasses clinking in Paris, leather seats in first class, I was sitting across from my lawyer, signing papers that would quietly dismantle his entire life. Sam laid everything out in plain language. Legally, he said, tapping the folder, he had the right to sell, if the refinancing was clean. But it wasn't. He forged your signature, Ina. That alone is enough to blow this wide open. And the money? I asked. Sam's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Already flagged. Once the fraud is established, every transaction tied to that sale becomes radioactive. That night, Uncle David called. I went deeper, he said. Way deeper than Richard ever thought I would. I closed my eyes, already knowing. He's been hiding income for years, David continued. Cash jobs, offshore transfers, underreported earnings. The house sale was just the crack in the dam. How bad is it? I asked. David laughed softly. Bad enough that the IRS will want to meet him personally. 2 days later, Richard's plane landed. I wasn't there to greet him. I didn't need to be. I watched from across the street as he tried to unlock the front door of the house he no longer owned. I watched the smugness fade from his face when the keypad beeped red. Again. And again? My mother stood behind the door, arms crossed, her posture tight with panic. Richard turned, confused, irritation rising. That was when his phone rang. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I didn't need to. His shoulders sagged. He sat down on his suitcase like the weight of the world had dropped on him all at once. Accounts frozen. Cards declined. The IRS audit notice delivered. I drove away before he looked up. Later that night, my phone buzzed. Mom? Ina, she whispered. Something's wrong. Richard's accounts. Everything is locked. I took a sip of water and waited. They said there's an investigation, she continued. Do you know anything about this? I thought about the house, the sign, the boxes. You told me to look at the bigger picture, I said. I finally am. Her breathing hitched. We were just trying to help you. No, I said calmly. You were trying to control me. She started crying then, Not out of guilt, out of fear. The next update came from Uncle David. Richard's business is frozen, he texted. Clients pulled out. Bank won't touch him. I replied with a single word. Good. 2 days later, my mom kicked him out. I didn't hear it from her. I heard it from David, who sounded almost amused. She locked him out, he said. Told him to deal with his own mess. Where is he? I asked. No idea, David replied. Probably sleeping in his car. I sat back and stared at the ceiling. For years, Richard had treated me like I was disposable, a resource, a child playing at adulthood. Now he was homeless. A few nights later, my phone rang again. Mom. Ina, she said, her voice trembling. We need your help. I laughed softly. Help with what? Richard's staying in a motel, she said. The money is gone. Nearly all of it. You spent $500,000, I said evenly. What did you think would happen? We made a mistake, she whispered. Yes, I said, you did. And I hung up. At 11:47 p.m., there was a knock on Mark's door. I already knew who it was. Richard stood there looking nothing like the man who'd smirked at me weeks earlier. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes sunken. Desperation clung to him like sweat. Ina, he said hoarsely, please, I just need a place to stay. I stared at him. This isn't your home anymore, I said. He snapped then, called me selfish, ungrateful, heartless. When he wouldn't leave, I called the police. There's a man outside threatening me, I said calmly. Richard bolted before they arrived. That was the last time I ever spoke to him. After Richard ran from the police, everything unraveled fast. Not dramatically, not loudly. It collapsed the way rot always does, quietly, from the inside out. The IRS investigation escalated within days. What started as an audit turned into a full federal case once they traced the forged mortgage documents back to him. Forging a signature on refinancing paperwork isn't a mistake. It's a felony. Sam filed the fraud case immediately. Once that happened, there was no putting the lid back on anything. Richard tried to salvage what little he had left. He called old contacts, former clients, even distant relatives he'd mocked for years. No one picked up. When people smell legal trouble, they disappear. My mother, meanwhile, went into full survival mode. She froze every joint account, lawyered up, filed for divorce. Not because she suddenly understood what she'd done to me, but because fear finally outweighed loyalty. I heard about it from Uncle David. She's protecting herself, he said bluntly, not apologizing. Don't confuse the two. I didn't. A week later, Sam called with an update. They flagged Richard's passport, he said. Tried to book a flight out of the country last night. I sat up straighter. And? Arrested at the airport. Federal hold. I nearly choked on my coffee. Richard, the man who once told me I didn't deserve a house like that, was now sitting in a holding cell, drowning in debt and criminal charges. The irony wasn't lost on me. The settlement came quietly. The fraudulent sale was reversed. Insurance covered the loss. Richard's remaining assets, what little was left, were seized. I didn't get that house back, and I didn't want it. I bought a new one. Smaller, cleaner, fully, unquestionably mine. My name was the only one on the deed. No co-signers, no family help, no fine print. A few days after I moved in, my mom called again. This time she sounded small. Ina, she said, I want to apologize. I didn't respond. I should have trusted you, she continued. I should have talked to you. I closed my eyes. You chose him, I said quietly. Every time it mattered. You don't get to rewrite that now. She started crying. I ended the call. That was the last conversation we ever had. Weeks later, Uncle David texted me one final update. Richard is facing federal charges. He'll be lucky to avoid prison. I set my phone down and looked around my new living room. No boxes, no tension, no fear of someone taking what I'd built. Just peace. For the first time in my adult life, I owed nothing to anyone. No guilt, no obligation, no expectation to be grateful, just freedom. And somewhere out there, Richard was lying awake in a cell, wondering how the woman he dismissed as a kid had dismantled his entire world without ever raising her voice. Completed.